Okay. So starting a new parak, Tashi, parak 9, and that's the $8. Okay, back into yevamos, but I don't think that it's too complicated yet. I'm not familiar, but we'll see how it goes. Hey, Moshe, tell me if we're ready. We're ready? Yeah, good. Okay. So the parak starts. Yesh mutaras lebalein v'asuros liyevmein, mutaras liyevmein v'asuros lebalein, mutaras leilu leilu, asuros leilu leilu. You have all the possible shavuot. You have all the possible mixes and matches. You can have a relation, a scenario where the woman was mutter to her husband, but she's also to the brother-in-law. And the Mishnah is going to spell out all the different cases. You can have the opposite. It could be possible that she was mutter to her brother-in-law, but she was also to her husband.
Yeah, but the first case, that's mutter to husband and husband to brother. That's Pasha.
No, why is it Pashit? No, it means that even that when her husband dies, what do you mean? Her husband dies, and there's going to be the relationship is going to be Asa. Yeah, you could have. We had at the beginning of the Masechta, we had 15 serious cases about Chayvei Krisus and things like that.
After the husband dies.
Yeah, and it should be a Yibum, but she's not allowed to marry the Yavam. It could be opposite cases that she was not allowed to marry her husband, but she's allowed to marry the Yavam. She wasn't, the first marriage she had was not good. She shouldn't have done it, but she did. She is mutter to marry the Yavam. It's not. We're not talking about Chayvei Krisus over here. We're talking about Chayvei Lav and things like that. The third case would be Mutoros Le'elu Le'elu. You can have mutter to both. That's the standard case. Asuros Le'elu Le'elu. You can have usher to both. And now it's going to start off the 4 lists. We have 4 lists, and it's going to say each one of them. That's a assume model, but just see what's going to happen. That's going to be the 4 scenarios that it's going to show us. So the first one is, I would have made charts if I would have had more time, but I don't think it's so complicated. Elu Mutaros Lebalein v'Asuros liyevmein. The first case is they were mutter to the husband, but they're also to their brother-in-law. What's the case? Good.
He's an heir.
Yeah, so it's not talking. It seems it's not talking about Arab over here. It's talking about Chayvei Lav, and we'll see some of them are Chayvei Isur Kahuna. So I didn't get a hold on the parak yet. So just today I just was able to do it one time. So I'm not into it yet. But let's just go with the flow.
Okay.
The first case is a Kohen Hedyot married an Almana, which is allowed to. A Kohen Hedyot is allowed to marry a widow. Just the Kohen Gadol is not allowed to. But then he died, and he has a brother who's a Kohen Gadol. So the Kohen Gadol is not allowed to marry. So the husband was okay, but the brother-in-law now cannot because that's a Chayvei Lav. I say, we'll see. So the Kohen Gadol is not allowed to marry a widow.
He gives her a cleat.
So then I'll have to do chalitza. Right? The next case is Cholol, Shenosek Kshera. A Cholol is a person who was born of Isser Kahuna. So he was a Kohen.
He started with Kohen Hedyot. That was the beginning of the.
Right. I tried to make at least some periods over there to show the cases. This is the first category. First one was Kohen Hedyot married Almana, a widow, and he has a brother's a Kohen Gadol. Mutter to the husband, Asa to the brother-in-law. Second case, it was a simple idea always. Cholol Shenosek Kshera v'yesh lo ach kosher. A Cholol is a Kohen, but his father married Isser. Let's say his father married a Grusha. So he's a Cholol. The son is a Cholol. He's allowed to marry a kosher woman. He's allowed to marry even a Kohenes. He's even allowed to marry a Kohen. We'll see in the Gemara today. There's no Isser for Kohenes. A Bas Kohen has no Isser to marry. Only a Kohen has also to marry certain. But there's no Isser on the Cholol to marry, on the Kohenes to marry a Cholol. That was a good marriage.
What's the problem with the it's kosher?
And then when the Cholol dies, and now he's a Kohen kosher. The brother is a Kohen kosher. He's not allowed to marry. I'm sorry. And now after they had relations, once the Cholol had relations with the Ksher, even though they were allowed to marry, but she becomes us. We had that before. That was a chiddush that he now makes her into a Chalola.
Oh, okay.
Halala or be Psula, even if she'd be Yisraelis also, we're going to say. Ksher doesn't only mean for anything, if she'd be Yisraelis also. When a Cholol has relations with a woman, she becomes us at the Kohuna. So now that the brother was a kosher Kohen,
he's kosher Kohen, right?
Because let's say the father had first a wife he has 2 wives. One is a Grusha, one was not. So the even goes with the father, common father. 2 brothers, common father, Kohen. One of them could be a Cholol, one could not be.
Yeah.
So here the case would be that the Cholol married the Ksher, that was okay. That was with the marriage. But then when he dies and now she falls to even to the Ach Kasher, he's not allowed to marry her because she's a Psula. I forgot to go to Halal. Third case, Yisrael Shenasa Bas Yisrael. That's really fine. That the Yisrael married a Bas Yisrael, everything's fine. But then when he dies and she falls to Ibum, the brother happens to be a Mamzer, Mamzer, which of course the same father could have one son who's a Mamzer, one son that's not. Depends who he's born from. And fourth case, Mamzer Shenasa Mamzeres, which is a kosher marriage. Now that's preferable what he should do.
It
The
has a
child,
brother who's kosher.
what-
Who's a
what?
Yisrael. It has a brother who's a
and that
Yisrael.
V'yeshach Yisrael. So he's not allowed to marry the mamzeres. All these cases, 4 cases, B'toras L'Balein, B'asuras L'Yivnein. They were mutter to their husbands, but they're not allowed to marry the Yavam. All these cases are either Chayve Lavan or Chayve Aseh, the case of the Kohen Gadol Kalmana. Next category, the opposite. It's probably that's going to be a mirror case. The next case is going to be mutter to the brother-in-law, but they were usher to their husband. And here it goes. Kohen Gadol Shekidesh Salmana. Yesh Loach Kohen Hedyot. Should be a period over there, just mark it off. The Kohen Gadol was married to Kiddush. Kiddush doesn't mean that he had relations. He just was Mekadosh her. So he's not allowed to marry her. The Kohen Gadol is not allowed to marry the widow. But then the Kohen Gadol died, and he has a brother who's a Kohen Hedyot. So he's not allowed to marry her because she's only an almana, and the Kohen Gadol didn't have relations with her that she should become a halala because of the relation. That says kiddush. It doesn't say that he nasa. That's they had to have relations.
So I'm sorry, Kiddush means what?
Abayat Mukadeshes, they gave her a ring,
And then he died.
and then he died. Right? They didn't
And
consummate
then
the
he died, and
marriage.
then she's still.
She's
needs Yibum.
and the brother
Because
is a
of
Kohen Hedyot, which is not to marry her.
Oh, it has nothing to do with Yibum.
It is even yes, it's going to be even. But and the Kohen Hedyot has
No, I
no problem.
mean, so the Kiddush
The Kiddush does
made
the Chaim
a
Yibum.
Zika.
Right.
Create-
Zika, that's good. Yes, yeah, that's true. That even from marriage of only kedushin, also if the husband dies, there's already a chiv yibum, and here there's a zika, there's a chiv yibum, and now that the widow falls to a kohen hedyot, that's a permissible marriage. Another case, kosher shenasa halala, a kosher man married a halala, which was okay, kosher marriage. Oh, I'm wrong. No, this is the personal marriage. He wasn't allowed to do that. A Kohen kosher married a halal. He's not allowed to. That's a chayve lavin. Almanot, how does it go? I forgot the
That's what
pasuk.
we just said, the one that had a kosher kohen who couldn't marry.
Could not marry a halal, right? So that was usher. But then when he died, he had a brother who also was a halal. So the halal and the halal, they're allowed to marry. So it was usher to the husband, but to the yavam. The third case, he's supposed to know some mamzeres. Yesh Loach mamzer. He's still married a mamzeres. He wasn't allowed to. But when he dies and the wife falls to yibum, he also happens to have a brother who's a mamzer. The mamzeres is a good shidduch.
I'm sorry,
Yes.
the one with the hull, where did it end?
Yesh Loach halal. That's good. This is the case. Yeah. Kasher shenasa halal, yesh Loach halal. So the first marriage was.
The first one was wrong, and the second.
Second one was
yeah,
okay.
yeah,
And
Yes,
we're
was
all
shenasa.
holding on the third case. Yishmael shenasa mamzeres, which was not allowed. And then when he died, he had a brother, and he has a brother who's a mamzer. So that marriage is good. Second marriage is good. So the initial marriage was also, but then the yibum is mutter. And the fourth case, mamzer shenasa bas Yisrael v'yesh loach Yisrael. The mamzer married a Yisrael, bas Yisrael, who's an Israeli, so he's not allowed to. But then when he dies, then the brother is kosher. So then she's kosher. She's a bas Yisrael. He's a bas. She doesn't become mussar because they had relations. They weren't allowed to. But even though they had relations, she doesn't become mussar.
So
She doesn't
it's different
become-
than like a hollow.
Right. And she doesn't be, and there's no issa. She would be a nivel apostle. She's also to marry a Kohen, but the Kohen, he wasn't a Kohen, he was Israeli. So that would be that. So and the Mish stands off, second white line, notoriously made, Basuris Lavalay. All these cases were cases that were the second category is mutter to the Yavam, but also had been also to the husband. Now it gives the third category, those that are also both to the husband and to the Yavam. Velu Asturas Leilu Leilu, both also to both. Kohen Gadol, Shenasa Salmana, V'Yeshlach Kohen Gadol. Oh, Kohen Hedyot. Should have put a period over there. That Kohen Gadol married a mother was Asa, and he has a brother who's a Kohen Gadol, also Asa. Even if the brother's a Kohen Hedyot, it's also Asa to him now because once he was Nasa, it wasn't Kiddush, it was Nasa. That the Kohen Gadol actually had relations with Almana, so she becomes a Halala now.
So why do you need the case of the Kohen?
Right, you don't need the case of the Kohen Gadol. Okay, the case of the Kohen Gadol would even be good if it would have been only Kiddush. Even if it would have been Kohen Gadol Kiddush as Almana, also a Sasa to the Kohen because she's an Almana. But the case that it says Nasa, you're right, that doesn't have to have the Kohen Gadol. Even the Kohen Hedyot is not allowed to, because once she had relations with her, Nasa, the case that it does say that he had relations, so then she became Halala.
So in case that it was Kiddush, only if one was a Kohen Gadol.
Right. And that's what I said before. That was the case that I said earlier. Kohen Gadol Kiddush as Almana, V'Yeshlach Kohen Hedyot. That was the case where it was mutter for the Yavam. And the next case, where are we? Third white line.
Why did it say O Kohen Hedyot?
Okay, because the brothers of Kohen Hedyot also it's also because since the Kohen Gadol had relations with Almana, like it says the first line of the word, first one on the line, Shenasa Salmana. You see that third line, first word, Shenasa. So that means that he had relations with her. So if she had, that was a be a psula.
Now we're going O Cohen Hedyo to Shenasa.
No. Look, I'll try to highlight it here.
O Cohen,
Gadol Shenasa Salmana v'yesh lo ach kohen gadol o kohen hedya.
O period.
Right.
Oh. Okay.
Because once she had relations, the kohen gadol and the one had relations, and now she's a halala, and she's not allowed to marry any, even the kohen hedya now.
I see. Okay.
The next case, we're looking now for Asr Lazel Kasha Shenasa Halala, V'yesh lo ach kasha. Two brothers that were Kohanim Ksherim, and the first brother married a halala, which is not allowed to. Kohen's not allowed to marry a halala. And then when he dies, the brother's also a Kohen Kasha. So both of them are awesome. And what are we holding? This is
Yisrael Shenasa Matzah.
this is the third case. Yisrael Shenasa Mamzer V'yesh lo ach Yisrael. That he was kosher and she was not, and both brothers were kosher, and she was a mamzeres. So the husband was not allowed to marry her, and then the Yavam was not allowed to marry her. And the last case, mamzer shenasa bas Yisrael v'yesh lo ach mamzer, two brothers that are mamzerim, and the wife was kosher, so she was also both to the husband, also was to the Yavam. All those cases are suas leilu leilu. 4 cases of each. And now it ends off. Other women, they don't have any problems. So then they'll be mutter to both. That's standard case. It doesn't say any serious cases here about Chayve Krisis. It just talks about Chayve Lavin. We had here some Chayve Kuna. The Mishnah continues the same thing could happen. All the scenarios can happen also. Shnius with Divrei Sofrim. You can have the same cases as Drabanans. We said that Shnius means Isui Drabanan. And Rashi tells you the cases over here, like we had, let's say, Aim Imo is a Drabanan. And not, is that true? Aim Imo. She has a case. Shnius Aim Imo shall bound, below shall Yavam. Yeah, Aim Imo is a case of Drabanan. Shnius means it's a Drabanan. The Rabbanan added on more rice. That even though with the rice that's only us to marry one's mother, but a grandmother will be mutter, the Rabbanan asked that also. We had that once upon a time. Towards the beginning of the Masechta, we had charts of the Rabbanans, the rice, the Rabbanans. So here it says it the same scenarios as being to one and not being to the other. The same thing we said till now, having to the husband, not to the Yavam. You could have the same scenarios by Shnios. Shnios means it's Erva Rabbanan. So stuff we talked about the Raisa. The case till now was all the Raisa. It's about a mamzer and a Kohen with a halala, all that's the Raisa. But there's the same thing would apply by Rabbanans. Shnia, we said by Rabbanans, what do you do by Rabbanans? So then there's Chalitza without Yibum. Shnia Labam, below Shnia Liyavam. Asur Labam, Materas Liyavam. You could have a case where she's Isser Rabbanan to the husband and not Isser Rabbanan to the Yavam. Rashi gives you all the cases. So then Asur Labam, Materas Liyavam. That would be similar to that case that she was also to the husband, but Mutter to the Yavam. The opposite case, Shnia Liyavam, below Shnia Labal. That she's only has a Isser Rabbanan relationship to the brother-in-law, but not to the husband. That would be a case of Asur Liyavam, Materas Labal. And you could have Shnia Lazev Lazeh, Asur Lazev Lazeh, and you could have that she's a Shnia to both of them. So the scenarios also could apply to Rabbanans also. But on this, the Mishnah says, I think I'm reading the Mishnah right, but I'm not sure, that by Rabbanans, we're going to be more machmir in a way, more than by the Raisa. I think that's what the Mishnah is going to say, but I didn't have enough, I didn't get into it more enough. But the Mishnah says, I think that it's saying, Ein la lo ksuba, the rest of the Mishnah here, till we get to Alman al-Kohen Gadol over here, is saying that the Rabbanans, we machmir more. Ein la lo ksuba, v'lo peiros, v'lo mizonos, v'lo belos, v'avlat kosher, v'kofinos alos. That by the Rabbanans, when he's not allowed to marry, so then we make a lot of knossos, make a lot of fine penalties to make sure that they don't marry, and that if they married, that they should get separated, and they shouldn't happen. So we take away ksuba, from the woman. The woman, even though a husband has obligations of ksuba to the wife, and includes a lot of obligations, not just a lump sum of money, but other kind of obligations that come to the woman. So they take it all away from her. Since it was an Isser Rabbanan, they weren't going to marry, she forfeits the ksuba. Also, peros means the peros that the husband ate, and usually a husband has a right to eat peros, but here there are cases where he should not, then she has to pay it back. She doesn't even get reimbursed for the peros that he ate that he wasn't supposed to have eaten. And lo mazonos, he doesn't have to support her. And the Gemara will talk about, Rashi brings down, it doesn't only mean that he doesn't have to support her, surely not, because we want them to get divorced, he shouldn't have to support her. But the point is, even if she had borrowed money on the account of mazonos that he should have paid her, we don't give her reimbursement for that either. And lo belos. Belos means, the word belos, I think, literally means worn out garments, which would mean that if she brought in garments that and to the marriage, and they're still there, they're still available, the same garments. So she wants to take back her garments, but she doesn't get it back either. she doesn't get back the clothing that she brought in, even though she brought in, it's hers, and he has obligation for it usually. Like all the obligations we usually say, like Rashi brings down about this and look, they say some barzel, all these things, we're not gonna give her the rights that she has. And of course, Avlat kosher, because it's only drabanans, but kofanosa lahosa, you do force them to divorce. I think
But
that's
it
all.
doesn't go on to the next generation. That's what it means. The Vlad means the next generation.
Right, the child born of that union doesn't make him puzzle. He doesn't become a
He's going to
mom.
be a kosher.
He's kosher Jew. He's a kosher Jew. But we do force them to divorce.
The parents.
Right.
Yeah.
Kofanoso is the father, right? And then the Kofanoso, we force
Yeah,
the
the
father,
father,
right.
yeah.
And then I think that it's saying that by the Raisa, this all these comments we just finished saying about Tsuba, Paris, Mazonos, only by Draban and Shnios. But if it will be the Raisa, like we said before, cases of Alman the Kohen Gadol, Kushav Achalutza the Kohen Hedyot, Mamzer Sunasin El Yisrael, Pasisrael and Nasan El Mamzer, all these things are Yisrael the Raisa. They weren't allowed to marry on the Raisa level. Like a Kohen Gadol cannot marry an Almana, and a Kohen Hedyot cannot marry Kushav Achalutza. So is Drabanan, but usually goes together anyway. For some reason, they made a Gzera. And Mamzer, Nesina also is Drabanan, like a Mamzer Drabanan. They made we said also Nesina is Drabanan, but they gave it a din of the Raisa. We'll see more in the Gemara. So all these cases, Yesh Lang Ksuba. That this here we didn't make the Chumrah to take away Ksuba. I think only Drabanan is not by the Raisa. Rashi doesn't say so much here. He says wait for the Gemara. So it's okay to wait.
It seems weird though, because if
It's even worse.
it's a lava of the Raisa.
Right. And by Drabanan is Machmer, and by the Raisa not. That seems to be the initial reaction. That should be triggered.
I reacted properly.
Yeah, I think so.
Baruch Hashem.
Sometimes we learn Mishnah.
But sometimes they do. The rabbis want to make sure that their edict is enforced, so they go all out to say like it's really important.
And even though people would be lenient on Rabbanan, so we have to throw the book at them.
Yeah.
It could be what the Gemara is going to say, but I didn't get there yet. Okay, so now the Gemara starts analyzing the Mishnah again, and it goes to the first case. The first case, let's try to highlight it, I think.
This is material of the
So the first case was Kohen Gadol, Kohen Hedyot. Shenasa Salman V'Yishloach Kohen Gadol. That was the case.
Kohen Hedyot says Almanah.
V'Yishloach. So it was a case that it was
Good for him and not good
mutter to the husband, right? He was mutter to marry her because he was a Kohen Hedyot, but he has a brother who's a Kohen Gadol, so he can't marry. So the Gemara was asked the kasha over here. How does the Gemara ask? My ear is the Tani Nasa. Listen to Kiddush. What if it would have been that he didn't actually? The word Nasa means he had relations.
Right.
What if he didn't have relations? Also, it's also to the brother. He died. The Kohen Hedyot died,
Right.
and he only had the condition to the one. Also, the Kohen Gadol cannot. The brother Kohen Gadol cannot marry because she's an almana. So why does it have to say Nasa? It could have said Kiddush. That's the Gemara's kasha. So that's the first Gemara's kasha. My year the Tani Nasa, listen to Kiddush. The Chitem with time of the Nasa, that will say below Sase. You might say, so we know we had this before, this idea that a Kohen Gadol, there's a Lo Sase, he's not allowed to marry Almana Ubusha, B'Chalalo Zonos, Eila Loikach. He's not allowed to marry an Almana. That's Almana Ubusha. But there's also an Asay that he has to Kim Besulami Amavi Kachisha. There's a positive commandment to marry a virgin. So if there's only was Kedushin, so she's still a virgin. So there's only a Lo Sase. Means the Kohen Gadol, is he allowed to marry the woman who was a widow from Kedushin?
The Kohen Gadol.
She's still a
She's still a basula. So there's a Lo Sase, but no Asay. So the Gemara is going to say the regular Colossians we had Asay the Lo Sase. Aval Kiddush Asay v'Dechol Lo Sase. Maybe say like that. That if there would be only a Kiddush, so the Kohen Gadol would be able to marry her because he has a mitzvah of Yibum, mitzvah Saseh, and there's only a Lo Saseh standing in the way. That Almana, usually a Kohen Gadol cannot marry an Almana, but here there's a mitzvah of Yibum. So the mitzvah Saseh of Yibum should override the Lo Saseh. Maybe he should marry her. Only in the case where it was Nasa and she's already also there's a not a virgin, then it's Aseh v'Lo Saseh. Ein Aseh Dechol Lo Saseh v'Aseh. Maybe that's Shana Mishnah. Maybe if it would have been Kiddush, maybe he would be allowed to marry her. But the Gemara says not true. But Kula Pirkin Aseh v'Lo Saseh, who will also say that v'Dechol Lo Saseh. That whole parak is not like that. We have cases where it's only a Lo Saseh, and not the Lo Saseh v'Aseh. And also, for some reason, the Gemara doesn't go into the reason of here. Rashi tells us that the Gemara says earlier reasons. The Gemara had a couple of reasons many pages ago. If the reason is because of a pasuk, or maybe it's a gzeira. I think if I looked it up before, that the reason the Gemara comes out over there is because really I say docholos I say, but it's only going to be for the first time they have relations. But then there's no mitzvah of yibum anymore, and they have to divorce. Usually when people are yibum, they can stay married, even though the mitzvah is only the first initial time that they had a union. That's the mitzvah of yibum. But they can stay married. But here, there's a avera going on. So the first time I say the chalos asay. I think that's what the Gemara says over there. Rashi brings a different Rashi over here, but the other choice that the Gemara said. But whatever the reason is going to be, it's not true that even if it's only a plain los asay. I think it came up a couple of weeks ago where Eliezer asked how come you don't say asay the chalos asay. So that's the sugi over there. You don't say asay the chalos asay. So whatever the reason is. We're not going into the whole sugi that the Gemara said it earlier, but it's not true. Even if it only would have been a los asay alone, Yibum does not override a los asay. So back to the question.
So back to, it could have
said
said
kiddush,
kiddush.
right? Because even though it's only going to be a los asay, a Yibum does not override. The answer. So Rashi tells us. Rashi brings a pasuk over here. The Gemara has other reasons also. Where's the Gemara? We have Rashi brings down a nafka my time, but the nafka lam beferik beis. We have also yivim to ashara only if it's so. There's other drushes over there also. The Gemara there's a few answers to the kasha, but the Gemara here doesn't even quote them. It just says that we have many cases where the yibum does not override a lo saseh. So whatever the reason is, we're not going into it. But it's not true that the kohen gadol will not be able to do yibum even if it would only be kiddush and only would be a lo saseh. It doesn't override. So the Gemara says you're right. It could have dafka. It could have said kiddush. The Kabbalah Misni Sefer Kohen Gadol Shenasa as Salmana and Dafka Nasa the Shavi Chalala Aval Kidei Sharia Alei Taminami Resha Nasa. The one tries to answer that is Dafka Agav. It don't need it. The reason why it says this is because later on, if we jump to the third case, right? The third case in the second white line, Ela Suris Elu Elu, it says Kohen Gadol Shenasa Salmana. Here, the first word on the third line Shenasa, over there it says Nasa as Dafka because over there we want to say. That's why the Kohen Hedyot brother cannot marry her either because she already became puzzled from the relation. So over there, that has to say Nasa because of that. So it also says in the first case, it also said Nasa, even though you didn't need it. Maybe this word Nasa is Agav, the word that it says on the third white line Nasa. Because of the third case, that's why it says in the first case. But you don't really need it. See the more inside. Mishum the Kabbalah Misni Sefer, that he needed in the third case, Kohen Gadol Shenasa Salman over there, Dafka Nasa, because he made her a halala by having relations. But if it only would have been kedushin, it would be mutter to the brothers of Kohen Hedyot. So that's why he says it over here. But the Gemara is not happy with that. The Gemara asks, listening if you look in the cases, so there was a case in between. We jumped just now in the first case, Shenasa, to the third case where it said
Nasa is the middle.
Nasa is the Mitzias is the middle.
Yeah.
And the one is asking that's the third case. But in the middle case, look at that. That's the two lines before it spreads. Shekidesh, first one on the line. And over there, it's talking about Dafka Kidesh because over there it wants to say that it's the Kohen Gadol only was Mekadesh, it didn't have relations. That's why it's mutter to the brother the Kohen Hedyot. So if you're doing things only because Agav's and on the contrary, it should have said Kidesh because the second case is Kidesh. Don't say Nasa because the third case is Nasa. That's not a good teretz. Ella Mishum Bas Buksa. The Kabbalah Misni Chalolchin Bas Buksa. What's a Bas Buksa? No, Bas Buksa Rashi sounds like Shnuya Besida. Rashi doesn't translate it literal. Doesn't say literal translation, which I didn't look up, but it sounds like the classmate, the one because of the one that's in the same class means that in the rest of the cases here is also all Nasa. The rest of the cases in this first case, not because of the second and third cases. In the first categories, not because of the third category, second category, the first category. The first category has 4 cases, as we enumerated them. There are 4 cases, and the other 3 cases are all Nasa. Here it is. You have over here in the first case, Chalol Shenasa, Yisrael Shenasa, Mamza Shenasa. All these cases is Nasa. So because of that, so it's because this one also, Anechnam, he didn't have to say so. It's Agav, but it's not Agav of the other categories. It's Agav of the other categories within the same list. So Bas Buksa, I don't know. I think sometimes the Buksa means a small house like a biksa. I'm not sure. I didn't look it up, but I get the idea that it means it's in the same because in the same it's a fellow cases within the same category. The Kabbalah Misni Chal Shenasa Sheira and over there time of the Nasa the Shavi Chalala but Kidei Shayalei the Shemachi Kitani Nasa. Since the other case have to talk in this category talk about that had relations because like this Techalo that Nasa Sheira because he had relations that's why he made it a Chalala. But if it only would have been Kiddush, the case wouldn't have been true. So too, all the cases it says Nasa, even though this particular case could have been Kiddush. That's good.
Where's that end?
That ends by the bottom line. My area by the pink, and that's the next kasha now. My area the Katani Almana listening Basula. That's an interesting chap that the Mishnah says that the Gemara asks. This first case, what do we want? That the brother Kohen Gadol cannot marry her because she's an almana. Even if the first brother had married her when she was not an almana, but he died, he made her an almana. The first brother This case is
Oh, why not say she's a basula?
yeah,
And
she
now we
did.
marry her and his brother can't marry her.
Right. Why is why? Because he died. He made her into an almana. You don't have to make that she's an almana, pre-digested almana. She's an almana now because he died.
Very good.
You should have asked that. Huh?
But he wouldn't have been usher.
It's looking for a case. Mutter to the husband, usher to the yavam. Here's a
Mutter
case.
to the
The
husband.
Kohen Gadol and Kohen Head
Oh,
married a
Kohen.
woman, very fine, good marriage, but now he died. Every Kohen Gadol cannot marry. Every Kohen Gadol is always cannot do yibum because obviously by yibum, but the definition means that she's a widow.
She's an almana.
Not because she was that the brother married a widow, because he died. The brother made her into a widow by dying.
Okay.
So why does it have to say almana?
Here she's a double almana.
Right, you don't need that.
Right.
For my years in almana, let's say basula. That's the bottom line. And the
Mhm.
Gemara answers. Oh, first the Gemara tries to say a halacha. Maybe the halacha is happening. Maybe when we talk about if she's mutter to the yavam, we don't look at right now. We look about the original marriage. That when she first gets married, we look at it as if it's a marriage to the yavam also. And maybe even though now the brother died, she became an almana. Maybe that doesn't affect. Maybe the Kohen goes a lot of marry her the same way that he'd be a lot of the brother when the brother married her, it was a permissible. She was not an almana. So that is what triggers the yibum, and we don't have to look now if she's an almana. The Kohen Gadol will be allowed to marry her because she was mutter to the initial marriage, and we look at him as if
Mapila means it falls.
it
Just
makes
it was
the yibum.
mutter to him. The mutter it goes to the brother.
Right,
Also.
that causes the yibum. The yibum is the first marriage, as if that's what's now retroactively taking case to the yavam. We had the sugi once before this idea, and we don't hold like it. We say that now what's happening now she's falling to yibum, not that she fell to not that the first marriage is attributed to the brother also. So
Okay,
this
but right now we're in a, if you want to say.
right, but the more is entertaining the possibility that he would be mutter to marry her if she had been a basula at the time of the first marriage. If you're going to say so, but the Mishnah says not like that. The next case is it talks about that the cholol married k'sheira v'lo mina nisuan arishonim ma'pilim. What's the case over here? Cholol shenasa k'sheira v'yesh lo ach kosher. Here this case that why do we this case? Mamish the second case after this. This case cholol shenasa k'sheira. A cholol married k'sheira. And that was a mutter.
Obviously, he's a Kohen.
He's a Kohen cholol, married a k'sheira, and he's allowed to do that. But he made by relations, by having relations, but he made her a cholol.
Oh, and we don't say that just as he was there to make her
was
marry her.
married.
We don't say that the brother.
Right,
can
right.
marry
You
her.
don't say that the brother at the time when the brother
if
was
he
first
would've been a
married.
cholol.
Right,
Yeah.
you're right. You don't say that. So you see that our time doesn't hold to that. So here the Gemara says you're right. Habad, the third line, Habad Mishum Sefer. Here the answer is going to be the reason why it says Almana is because of cases coming up later. Mishum de Kaboy Misti Sefer. Kohen Gadol Shenasa Almana v'yesh Lalach Kohen Gadol Kohen Hediot, and over there Dav Almana Abba Basula Chazile Mishimachi Ketani Almana. This is the third category. Which means when we started answering the first kasha, which we fell off because instead of going to the third category, go to the second category. But here the Almana that it says over here, it does have to say Dav Almana. Here it says that what was the case over here? Kohen Gadol Shenasa Almana. It has to be almana over here, because the reason why it's asa is because she's an almana. The Mishnah is looking for a case where it's asa le'elu le'elu. This almana on the third line has to be almana because to keep the same cases as before as later on. So we put it over here also. This case didn't have to say almana just because of the semantics. We want to make it the pattern should be the same. The Mishnah should read easily, but enechanami. Mishum Sefer. Mishum since later on is going to say in the Sefer in the third case. Over there, because it would have been a basula, it would have been mutter to the first. Therefore, Mishamachi Ketani Almana. Finished. So we got through the beginning of the Mishnah. We had some two kashas right away in the beginning. Why does it say Nasa? Why does it say Almana? And we answered both kashas. Both of them are Agav, and it's true.
I missed it from the O.
Where?
Or if you would say that it was a Kohen Hediot.
That's part. Let's read it in one breath. Yesh lo ach Kohen Gadol or Kohen Hediot.
Oh.
That's how we read. That's how we read the Mishnah. We had to.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
So over there, the first husband was allowed to marry her, was not allowed to marry her because Kohen Gadol Shenasa Almana. So they would have to say the case. That's the case we wanted. We wanted the case where the first husband was not allowed to marry her. So they have to say the word Almana. If it would have been a basul, he would be allowed to marry her. That was the third case of the Mishnah.
But if he had a brother who was a Kohen Hediot.
And also, once he married her, that's already going into the details of the case. So there he had relations with her, so therefore she became a halal, and the Kohen Hedyot brother can't
She
marry her
became a
either.
halal,
But the case that the Mishnah is talking about is that the Kohen Gadol was not allowed to marry her.
in the first place.
So it has to stay on
It has
one.
to stay on one.
So we finished all that. And that's the end of this. End of, we can make a big period over there, and now the Gemara continues. And the Gemara is going to ask, there are more cases that it could have said. The Mishnah had a couple of cases. Now the Gemara is going to ask, there are more cases that it could have said. And Misala the Chiyasar of Dimi Yomer Rabbi Yochanan Mitzvah Sheni Shenasa Mitzvahs Rishona Beno Sheni Havi Listening Nami Mitzvah Sheni Shenasa Shtei Mitzvahs Achas Rishona Vachashniya will go on. We had a machlokes a couple of pages ago by a mitzvah. We said that mitzvah is us at the first two generations. Third generation is mutter. And we had a question: do you go with the husband? How do you count the generations? If a mitzvah, we have a mitzvahs, which he's allowed to. They're all gay, but the first generation mitzvah is not allowed to marry, and also mitzvah is no difference man or woman. There's no difference zacharim and the kavos over there. They're all us. Second generation is also us. The third generation is mutter. And we had a question: if there was a marriage between the first generation and the second generation, what's the child? Do you go with the father with the mother? There was a machlokes. One said you go with the father. One said you go with the mother. If you go with the father, then you can't have two children that are different generations because they have the same father.
Mhm.
But there was a machlokes over there. One says you go with the mother. If you go with the mother, you can have two wives, and it could be two generations. The same father could have two children, and two generations. So the more an ask, according to that, I'll be able to find a scenario where you could also have this mix and match of
Mitzvah Shnia and Mitzvah
Right.
Rishona.
Yeah, that's the Mishnah. The Gemara spells it out for you. If Avdimi is right, if Avdimi Yom Yochanan is right, what did he say? That a second generation mitzvah that married a first generation mitzvah, the son is a second generation. It means you go with the wife. That this is just introducing that according to Avdimi Yom Yochanan, the one who's kobeya, which generation it is, it goes according to the woman, not according to the man. If that's true, listening now, we have a case, and the more cases the Mishnah could have said. Listening now, mitzvah sheni shenas shtei mitzvahs. What if this mitzvah sheni, a second generation mitzvah, married two wives? Achas rishona, achas shniya. He married one who was a first generation mitzvahs, and the son is a sheni, and he married also a second generation mitzvahs, which the son is a shlishi. So a kid said we got two brothers. That's what we're looking for. We have two brothers. That one is a second mitzvah sheni, and one is a mitzvah shlishi. Two brothers from the same father. Yibum. We're talking about Yibum over here, and you can have a case that one is the second generation, one is the third generation. And we can have all the mix and matches of
Because of the mother.
because of going with the mother, right?
Yeah.
And they have two wives. So we could get, if we can invent a case, a scenario, we'll have that the husband was allowed to marry her and Yavam was not allowed to, the Yavam was allowed to, the brother was not allowed to. That's what the Gemara is going to do now. And he had children from both of these wives. And as we said, one is the number two, one is a three. If they marry normal, what does normal mean? The second generation is only allowed to marry a second generation, right? And the third generation is already a Jew, and he's allowed to marry he's allowed to marry a regular. So Ochai means the normal way. It means they did what they're supposed to do.
Mhm.
So that would be a case in Mutaras Lavalain, Vastus Ne'abnayan. They'd be mutter to their husbands because the number two married a two, or three married a three, but they also to the Yavam because now when they died now, so the second generation is also to the third generation because the third generation is a regular Jew. So the second generation would not wife. Oh, wait, what am I talking? Yeah, she's number two married a two and a three, and then their husbands die. So now the two goes to the three goes to the two. They're not allowed to marry each other. That would be a case where the mother to the husbands, also to the Yavamim. If it would have been the opposite, that the two married a three and the three married a two. So they were also to do that. And then when they die and they fall to the Yavamim, now it gets organized. Now the two to the two and the three to the three. Women mutter. If they would have married opposite, if they married the opposites, so then that would have been a case where they would have been mutter to the Yavamim, but also to the husbands. And you also can have a case in Mutaras Le'elu Yoros. You can have a case where they were mutter to both because of Yoros is allowed to marry both. If Yoros is allowed to marry a regular Jew, a third generation, Mitzri is a Jew, or can marry also a second generation. It means the Holy Spirit is only like Yavov B'Kal Hashem. But Yevolem B'Kal Hashem in the third generation. So the only issue is Kol. But if you hold that Kal Gerim Lo Ikri Kol, they'd be allowed to marry. So you could have a case of Mutaras to both. And Asur is Le'elu islandess. If the woman was an islandess, so then there's no Yibum in any case. So what would be the case that an islandess that I didn't think this out. Asur, they also to the husband. Why would the mitzvah not be allowed to marry an islandess? So I didn't. Why would the mitzvah not allowed to be married an islandess? There's no Yibum in islandess, but why would there be Yisraelis? in the Sheni Nasi Israelis, we have in this Asura Lo Mishum Israelis, he. That not because she's an islandess, because she happens to be an islandess, but she also is Israelis. So there's no heter to marry an islandess. Means the halacha that we say that a Misri Sheni is not allowed to marry a Jew, even if she's a Jewish woman, even if she's not, is not allowed to marry her. So it's also to the initial marriage was also not because of the islandess part, but because of the Israelis part. That the Misri Sheni and then the Yibum Sholi is also by an islandess because there's no Ashatele. So the Gemara is asking why, if that's true, that it's possible to have such a scenario that one man, two brothers with a common father should have two generations. One is the second, one is the third generation. So the Mishnah could have said this case also. And there seems it would have been a bigger chiddush because it's a chayve asay. The whole issue of a mitzvah is only an asay because it says the third generation may marry. So there's no law over there. So I was asking, why doesn't it say this case also would have been a bigger chiddush? The Gemara answers ton of a shir. You're right, he could have said it, but it didn't give an exhaustive list. It said some and it left some. But always the Gemara always a standard question. Whenever it says it has to have at least two, because it's not going to just leave out one. So there must be another case also. My shy, the high shy. What else did it leave out? That it chose to leave this one out. You have to find me other things also. The Gemara says shir p'tzua daka. It could have left out a p'tzua daka. So Rashi gives the scenario over here. Well, what would have been with a p'tzua daka? It could have been all the cases. You had a p'tzua daka that married the Israelis, and the brother was a healthy man. So we could have other cases also could have found. So I didn't give all the exhaustive cases. And it happens to be psua daka is allowed. That's not a chiddush, but that's what the Gemara is going to say. That maybe it's not a chiddush. That wouldn't be considered leftover. The hatan chayve lavan. It says very chayve lavan. So that wouldn't be a chiddush to say another case of a chayve lavan. But here would be a chiddush to say an asay of the mitzri. As the Gemara explains, Atu chayve lavan milo katani bahadar tani. Fakatani kohen hediot shenas almana v'chol shenas kshera. That it has but the Gemara is first the Gemara says that there's no reason why I should say chayve lavan because it says it already. But the Gemara says it's not true. The Mishnah has a couple of chayve lavan. When the Gemara talks about mitzri, the Gemara is very interested to say mitzri because it's only an asay. So say a chiddush. So the Gemara says, but chayve lavan is the Gemara is not satisfied to say that's a shir because there's no chiddush in it. Because there's other cases of chayve lavan. There's no reason to say more chayve lavan. But the Gemara says, but in the cases that it does say a couple of cases of chayve lavan. It says kohen hedish shenas almana. I'm sorry. But kohen hedish shenas almana, and it means that kohen gadol is marrying. That's the kohen chayve lavan over there is going to be the kohen hedish marrying kohen gadol marrying an almana, and also chol shenas ksheva. Also this year b'cholol is also. So you have cases of chayve lavan more than one. So why are you telling me that if it is just the same category of chayve lavan, there's no reason why I should say a lot of cases? It has a lot of cases. The Gemara says no. Who is tzricha le'lashminan because Rav Yudam Rav? Dami Yudam Rav. Those are ruksheros le'nasei l'psulim. There is going to be a chidushim over here that the Mishnah doesn't just tell you chayve lavan for no reason. It's not considered a shir. The Gemara is still attacking that just to say psua daka. That's not the reason it didn't say psua daka is because it's allowed without any chiddush. But the lav that it does say a chidushim. What's the chiddush? It wants to tell you that there's no issur for kohenes or ksheros to marry a cholol. Means in the Mishnah it does tell us information that there's no problem for a cholol to marry a kohenes kshera, and that we didn't know. So the Mishnah wants to tell you chidushim, but some to tell you a list of chayve lavan for no reason. That's not the reason. The Mishnah is not going to say many cases. For Ketani, but the Ma'aseh Kasha, for Ketani cholol shenasa kshera Yisrael shenasa bas Yisrael v'yesh lach mamzer. We do have an extra cases of lavan when it says that a cholol married a kshera Yisrael shenasa bas Yisrael v'yesh lach mamzer. That's also just chayve lavan. So the Mishnah is okay to say many cases of chayve lavan without any chidushim.
Those are two cases,
right? And if we don't, and one doesn't see any chiddush in one more than the other. It must know there is a chiddush over there. That's not just chazering over for no reason. That lav of a mamzer is a lav that's universal. No one's allowed to marry a mamzer. The case of a cholol is only dinei kuna, so maybe that's a chiddush that it's a case that doesn't apply to everybody. But the Gemara says no. Hakatani Yisrael shenasa mamzeres v'yesh lo ach Yisrael. Maybe there's a case here also, Mam Shishana Mam Zez, Veish Loach Yisrael. It does have cases that are redundant, even though there's no Chidushim. Allah Shmamina, Ton of Ashir, Shmamina. So the Gemara is happy to say that the reason that really he could have said this case, it could have had the case of mitzvahs, and the reason why it doesn't say it is because it has extra cases, and it could have, and the Psuadak, it has cases here that are not necessary, and it could have said Psuadak also. And the fact that it doesn't say it, it shows us that Ton of Ashir. So the Gemara is happy to say that there are extra cases, and you can't be right against Rav Dimi. It could be mitzvahs, but also been a good case, but it doesn't say it because it's not giving an exhaustive list. The Gemara in the next sugya goes into. It would have helped to have a chart on all this, but that lack of time, we got the general idea. The Gemara is going to open up a sugya about this point that we just learned a second ago, and the Gemara made a chiddush out of it, that there's no issur for a kohenes to marry a apostle. Means even though a kohen is not allowed to marry a chalala, a kohenes is allowed to marry a chalala. There's no issur for a bas kohen who's kosher. She's allowed to marry a chashuva kohen, and she also can marry a chalala. There's no issur on the kohenes to marry a psulim. And who says that? Those who are ksheris to not say lipsul. There's no issue on the kohenes kshera, the bas kohen, to marry a apostle. Maybe we have a support there. It's only Rav talking. It's not a brisa. Maybe we can find the brisa or the Mishnah. It says cholo shenasa kshera in the Mishnah. Our Mishnah gives a case that a chol married a kshera, which we thought that's what it's saying. A second ago, the Gemara said that's what it says. The chol married a kosher, and that says that's a mutter marriage. That means that he was allowed to marry her. Just if he when he has relations, she becomes puzzle. But it's the kosher marriage. My love kohenes, who did he marry? It says kshera. So in the Mishnah, I already said that it's a kosher kohenes, but it's not so simple. It means it's not obvious. It means the word kshera means she's a kosher woman. But the kosher what? Kosher kohenes or a kosher Yisraelis? Is she the daughter of a kohen or the daughter of Yisraelis? So the Gemara says usually a kohen should marry. Kohen marries kohenes. What?
Should marry kohen.
Right. So Rashi brings down here that as if there's a Gemara that says so, but I didn't find it. Rashi says that l'chatchila Kohen should marry. Here Rashi says here, right opposite the Gemara, the Carmelon Kohen close man shemotze lisa bas Kohen lo yisa bas Yisrael. That if a Kohen can find a shidduch of bas Kohen, means they should the Kohen l'chatchila according to Rashi should tell the shadchan that we're looking for a bas Kohen. If you don't have, I'll take other offers also. But l'chatchila should marry a bas Kohen. He brings a Gemara Pesachim that it says Sudas Rishus is a bas Yisrael the Kohen, but I don't think it says that over there. So I'm still have to look into that. But Rashi says that the usual shidduch between a Kohen should be a Kohenes. So when it says here Chol Shenasa Kshera, the Gemara thinks, doesn't it say that the Chol is marrying a bas Kohen? There's such a gift, so it means that's what's fitting that he should marry a Kohenes. So is that Omai Kshera Lakuna? And what does the word Kshera mean? That she's a bas Kohen, Kasha Lakuna, she's allowed to marry a Chol. Gemara says no, it doesn't mean that necessarily. No, the Israelis. The word Kshera doesn't mean that she's Omai Kshera Lakol. No proof. No proof to think from the Mishnah wouldn't be able to prove it. Rav does say so, but you can't prove it from the Mishnah.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
What is the kosher? Kosher lekahuna? That's
the choice. That's the question. Is she a bas Kohen or is she a bas Yisrael?
She's kosher to a Kohen, meaning that she's a bas Kohen.
Right. And if it says that she's a not a Kohenes, I'm not saying.
I'm sorry. Is it low or it's low Yisrael?
Low. No, it doesn't mean
it doesn't mean that.
My love. It says my love, and then the Brian says no. It doesn't mean that. Does it not mean Kohenes, which would mean Kshera means Kshera Lakuna? That even though she's a bas Kohen, she's kosher to marry a Kohen, but she's also mutter to marry a Cholo, because that's what it says. It says Cholo Shnasa Kshera. That's the quotation we're going on. Is these words over here? Cholo, whatever. Cholo Shnasa Kshera. What does the word Kshera mean? If Kshera means that she's a Kohenes who's mutter to marry a Kohen, it says here she's also allowed to marry a Cholo. But the Gemara says not necessarily doesn't mean that. The word Kshera over here might mean Israelis. And what does the word Kshera mean? And what if she's the Israelis? Who's the Ksheris? We don't say the Psulim. I'm not clear about this. But is there a question? Is the Gemara also questioning if Israelis who's mutter to marry Israelis also can marry a Kohen? Is the Nasiya Lakuna? She's the kosher Israelis, and the Gemara would say that is Ksheru Lakol. Why you call it Ksheru Lakol? She's also Ksheru Lakuna. I'm not sure. Unless the word Ksheris here doesn't have to mean that it's a Kohenes or Yisraelis. So that's mean somebody who's kosher to Kahuna still should be allowed to marry to a Chol, even though she's going to become puzzled. There's no issue for her to make herself puzzled, even though she was kosher tekuna. But the more saying maybe it doesn't say that. Maybe she wasn't kosher tekuna. She only was kosher to a kohol. She's mutter to marry into the Jewish nation, but not that she's mutter to marry a Kohen. Maybe if she's mutter to marry a Kohen, what?
How could she not be
Mutter to marry a Kohen?
Yeah.
Let's say she was a zona or whatever happened. She had to be a psula. Someone had relations with her. I'm not sure about this. I didn't think about it yet. But I think that if the Gemara is asking,
something like divorce.
yes, also would be good. Means the Gemara seems to be discussing is a mutter for a woman who's kosher to marry kahuna to make herself possible by marrying a chol. Even though there's no technical issue, but maybe the fact that she's. So I thought the Gemara was talking about Kohen, Bas Kohen only, but maybe from the Gemara now I'm thinking that maybe it doesn't mean that. I have to check it in again, try to get better shot tomorrow. But the Gemara says if the word kosher, that means kosher l'kol, yochi yesh loach kosher. When it says the word ach kosher, what does kosher mean? Nami kosher l'kol, who pasol l'kol. It talks about that there was somebody who was a cholol, and they had a brother who was a kosher. But you see, from the words cholol and kosher over there, cholol and kosher doesn't mean kosher.
If it's from the Kohen, it means
kosher tekuna. So doesn't that show that the word kosher over here means the Kohen doesn't just mean kosher to the nation? Elalav Kohen with who Kohen he Kohenes. If it says the word kosher means kosher lekuna, so when the word kasher means kasher lekuna. But the more again not impressed. Me the area who says even though the word kosher means kosher lekuna, the word kasher can mean kosher lekol, and it doesn't necessarily mean it. So the Gemara doesn't have a right to Rav. It means even the Rav did say so, as we started off, those who shares the Nasir of Psulin, but it's not a proof in the Mishnah. The Gemara thought it was like that, sounds like that in the Mishnah, but it's not a proof. Moshe Ravin, Bar Nachman has a question on Rav. So he wants to prove that it's also for Kshevet to marry a Cholon. It says Lo Yikochu. It says 2 times Lo Yikochu. Malamid Shal Isha Muzeres Al Yidei that the woman is also to the man. And the Gemara thinks it means to say the same way that a man who's a Kohen was not allowed to marry somebody who's puzzled. So to a woman, it's not allowed to marry someone who's puzzled to her. So she wouldn't be allowed to marry a cholon. Doesn't it say that? The Gemara says no, it doesn't mean that. You got it wrong. You mistranslated. Omar misinterpreted. Omar Rava who muzer he muzeres who lo muzer he lo mizdara. All it's saying is that if there's an issa to marry, let's say it says a Kohen shouldn't marry a grusha. So whose avera is it? Is only his avera? Does she get an avera? Is also for her? So that's what it's saying. It's saying that when it's also for him to marry her, it's also for her to marry him. But it's not coming to say that a whole different halacha altogether, that a woman who's pasul who's kosher for kuna should not marry somebody who's pasul. It's not saying that. You got it wrong. It's just saying that when there is a isser, it's isser both directions. The woman is also to marry. But the Gemara says that's not a chiddush. Of course, whenever there's isser to marry, it's also on the woman also. You don't know from this pasuk like kachu. But that's a general halacha and all kinds of isurim. It says if a man or a woman does any kind of avera, over there it says it sticks in a woman also. That be all averas, the woman is the same as the man. So we don't need a special pasuk to say that if a kohen is not allowed to marry a grusha, that the grusha is not allowed to marry a kohen either. You might think only by those isurim that apply to everybody. But things that are only limited to Kohanim, let's say a Kohen to marry Grusha, maybe over there it doesn't apply. This doesn't go on the woman, it only goes on the man. So I have to tell you this chiddush. But the Gemara says that we know from other places also. The time of the Kosev Rachmana b'nei Aaron, the Lo b'nos Aaron, the Lav Hachi Havamena Nashim Chayavos. Is there issa for a Bas Kohen to become Tamei? We know a Kohen is not allowed to become Tamei from Mace. Is there issa for a Bas Kohen? No issa. But how do you know that? Because it says a special pasuk b'nei Aaron. B'nai Aaron should not become Tamei and not b'nos Aaron. If not for the pasuk, we would have said that they're also included, even though it's only a issa she'ein shavah bakol. It's not a universal list. It's only bakuna, and you see that the isurim of men apply to women also, even if it's not only a universal issa. So here too, if it says that a kohen is not allowed to marry grusha, applies to the woman also. My time, Rav Mishum the Rav Yudah Marav, isn't it because Rav Yudah Marav that said that halacha we just meant over here? Rav Yudah Marav. He's the one who said this halacha over here that kol chatos adam would include that there's the issa by tumah also. So if so, we don't need the special halacha to tell you that the woman is not allowed to marry the man. The grusha cannot marry the kohen. Only after we have the lo yikochu that tells us this halacha that the woman is not allowed to marry the man, then we can apply it also to other cases like Bnei Aaron Tumah also. But if not, and that's why you have to have a pasuk of the Bnei Aaron to say not Bnei Aaron. But without, if we wouldn't have the pasuk, we would have said that the women are not prohibited. It's only a prohibition on the man. But once you have the pasuk that says by Kahuna also it applies to the woman, so then we have to have a pasuk to say that the Tumah Isra Tumah doesn't apply. 2 more lines. Ikadami kicha it's trichale. Salkatay techamena ligma mituma kamash malan. The reason why you have to have the word kicha is true. In general, what we do to say the woman is the same as the man. Once over here, the Torah says by Tumah that Dafka b'nei Aaron, and there's no Isra b'nei Aaron to become Tameh. You might think that also by the Yisur Kahuna, there's no Isra on the Grusha to marry the Kohen, only for the Kohen to marry the Grusha. That's why the pasuk got to speak of that. Kamash malan, that applies to the women also. Okay, that should call everybody. Thank you.
So we're-
Good luck.